Member for Gwadja.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my question is to the Attorney-General. Attorney-General, why did you not consult with the domestic violence and legal sector before announcing new domestic violence laws? Have you done any work to ensure these changes align with the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children, which the Northern Territory is signed up to? Have you considered, does this align with the Northern Territory Aboriginal Justice Agreement or the 35 recommendations from the coronial into the domestic violent deaths of 4 Territory women?
Attorney-General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for this very important question, because we have seen an increase in domestic violence across the Northern Territory of 82% over the last 8 years under a Labor government. They failed to take action to keep people safe, Madam Speaker, and this government, who was only elected less than 8 months ago, has taken action immediately, because we want the Territory to be a safe place, and we will absolutely take the steps needed to ensure that women and men, in some cases, are safer from domestic violence than they have been over the last 8 years. We have done so much work in this space already. I have met with the Women's Legal Services a number of times. The Top End Women's Legal Service, Madam Speaker, I've met with 3 times in the last 8 months. The Central Australian Women's Legal Services, I have met with 3 times in the last 8 months. I've also met with the CAFLU, the Central Australian Aboriginal Family Violence Organisation in Alice Springs. And so there has been consultation. We had a number of conversations about a number of factors to do with trying to keep women safe and providing those legal services to women, especially women who are victims of domestic violence. One of the key things I spoke very, very specifically with Top-End Women's Legal Services was the Victims Register, something that I introduced in this parliament this morning, which will be expanded, something, Member for Gwadja, that was part of the recommendations of the coronial that you mentioned in your question. So we're looking to expand all of that. There's legislation going to be debated in the next sitting of parliament, which means that more victims will be notified about more times when their offender is on the move. Most importantly, Madam Speaker, is we want to protect Territorians.
Order, Madam Speaker.
Take your seat, Minister. What's your point of order, Member for Gwadja?
Standing Order 110, relevance. The question is directly to the Attorney-General. The sector is saying they haven't been consulted. Why didn't you consult the sector before introducing these legislative changes?
Member for Gwadja, the Minister is answering the question. Please continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I was saying that the most important part of the legislation we've introduced today is that people who breach their DVOs will receive a mandatory sentence, Madam Speaker. And that is so important because victims need to be kept safe. Some of the deaths that we've seen in the Northern Territory is because the perpetrator has been out on bail, out in the community, out to revisit their victim time and time again. Those people need to be dealt with. There needs to be consequences for the perpetrators of domestic violence, and that is why I brought forward that.
Take your seat. Leader of the Opposition, what's your point of order?
110 relevance, Madam Speaker. It's specifically about the consultation process for the Attorney-General.
The Minister has talked about the consultation that she's done. That's what I heard her say, but please continue. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Labor just don't want to listen. And this is why the Territory was in such a state and which is why they were voted out last election. I've said it this morning, I said it this afternoon, about the meetings that I've had with the Women's Legal Services, which are so important. We need them to be having service delivery to our women, most vulnerable people in the Northern Territory. Madam Speaker, the other part of the legislation is the Victims Levy, which is going to increase to 41% for victim services.
Minister. Member for Wong